She was jamming a shiny master key into my front door, muttering loud enough so neighbors could hear, "This man isn't allowed to live here. I'll have him out today." I stood on the porch steps, arms crossed, letting her dig her own hole. Then she saw me and hissed, "You're trespassing! I'm calling the cops right now!" Her phone was out in seconds, her voice rising fake dramatic. "Officer, there's a dangerous man breaking into my house!" Within minutes, 2 patrol cars screeched up, lights flashing. She pointed at me like she had caught a criminal red-handed. The cops jumped out, hands on their belts, ready to move. "Sir, step away from the door," one barked. Karen smirked. "Yes, arrest him now. He tried to force inside." I didn't argue. I didn't raise my voice. I just glanced at the door, then at her, then at them. Something in my calmness made the officers hesitate. And right then, the lock clicked. Not from her fake key, but from the inside. The door swung open, and my wife stepped out in full uniform. The air froze. The cops stiffened, eyes widening. One of them actually stammered, "Chief?" Karen's confident grin collapsed in real time. She looked from me to my wife, back to the officers, and her lips parted like she couldn't breathe. She had no idea the trespasser she tried to frame was married to their commanding officer.
Karen's face turned pale as the officers straightened like school kids caught cheating on a test. "Chief, we didn't know," one started, but my wife raised her hand, calm but firm. "Report first. Why are you here?" Both cops looked like they wanted to sink into the ground. Ma'am, we received a call. A woman claimed a man was breaking into this property," one explained, glancing nervously at me. My wife's eyes slid toward Karen, sharp as glass. "And who," she asked slowly, "made that call?" Karen tried to laugh it off. "Oh, it was just a misunderstanding. I was trying to protect the neighborhood. You see, he doesn't belong here. Stop." My wife's voice cut through like a blade. "You tried to open our door with a key. You called in a false report, and you involved my officers in a lie." The cops exchanged glances, unsure whether to cuff her or vanish. Karen flailed her arms, desperate. No, you don't understand. I'm with the HOA. We have rules." "Rules don't override the law, and impersonating authority is a crime." I finally spoke, my voice steady but low. "Funny thing, Karen, you were so sure you'd get me dragged away, but you didn't even know whose door you were trying to open." Karen's mouth trembled. The 2 cops looked like they were waiting for permission to move. My wife's silence stretched, and you could feel the weight of it pressing down on everyone. Then finally, she said, "This isn't over. She's coming with me." Karen stumbled back, her confidence shattered. "What do you mean, coming with you?"
Karen's heels scraped against the concrete as she backed toward the sidewalk. "You can't touch me. I'm part of the HOA board. We make the rules here," she shouted, but her voice cracked. The neighbors had started peeking from their windows, a few even stepping onto porches. Whispers spread like fire. Everyone had seen the flashing lights, and now they were watching Karen squirm under my wife's stare. My wife stepped forward, her uniform catching the glow of the squad car lights. "No, Karen, you don't make rules. You broke them." She pulled a small body cam from her vest and tapped it. "And every second of this is recorded." Karen's eyes darted around, searching for support. "This is harassment. You can't prove anything." That's when I pulled my phone from my pocket, screen already lit. "Actually," I said slowly, turning it so the crowd could see, "my cameras have been recording you all week. Every fake notice you taped to my door, every time you trespassed on my lawn, and now trying to pick my lock." Gasps rippled through the small crowd. One neighbor muttered, "I knew she was lying." Another whispered, "She's done for." Karen's face twisted, desperation replacing arrogance. She turned back to the officers, her voice shrill. "Well, arrest him! Do something!" But the younger cop shook his head, his voice respectful but firm. "Ma'am, he owns this house, and you just filed a false police report." For the first time, Karen's bravado broke. Her lips quivered and her eyes filled with panic. My wife folded her arms, waiting. "Karen, are you ready to explain this at the station?" The silence that followed was louder than her screaming ever had been. Karen's knees almost buckled. She looked at the crowd gathering, then at the officers, and finally at my wife. Her voice dropped to a shaky whisper. "No, no, please, you don't understand. If this goes on record, I'll lose everything. My position, my reputation." My wife didn't flinch. "You should have thought about that before you abused your so-called authority." She nodded toward the officers. "Escort her to the car." The older cop hesitated, maybe out of habit, but then obeyed. He gently took Karen's wrist, but she yanked back violently, shouting for everyone to hear. "This isn't fair! He doesn't belong here! This neighborhood was perfect before he showed up!" A sharp gasp came from the crowd. One woman from across the street shouted, "Karen, enough! We're tired of your lies!" Another neighbor chimed in, "You threatened my kid last month, said he couldn't ride his bike on the sidewalk. Now look at you!" Karen's mask shattered completely. Her screams turned wild, her fingers stabbing the air at me. You ruined everything! I'll sue you! Karen! My wife's voice cut like steel. Not another word. The command landed so hard that Karen froze mid-breath. The officers finally cuffed her hands behind her back, her protests breaking down into whimpers. The whole street was dead silent except for the click of metal on her wrists. I leaned slightly closer, my words low, but clear enough for her and everyone else to hear. "You tried to get me thrown out of my own home. Now you're the one leaving, in the back of a police car." The crowd erupted, some clapping, some filming on their phones, others just shaking their heads in relief. Karen's eyes darted desperately from face to face, but there was no sympathy left for her. And then, a black SUV rolled slowly around the corner. The tinted window lowered, and another familiar face appeared, someone Karen clearly recognized. Her expression turned from panic to pure horror.
The SUV pulled up to the curb, engine humming low. The window slid down and a stern voice carried across the street. "What's going on here?" Karen's whole body stiffened. No, not you," she whispered, her face draining of color. It was the actual president of the HOA, the one Karen had been name-dropping for months, as if she controlled him. He stepped out of the car, suit crisp, eyes sharp, and surveyed the scene. Karen cuffed, cops uneasy, my wife standing tall in uniform, and me with the phone still recording. "Karen," he said slowly, disbelief thick in his tone, "are those handcuffs?" Karen tried to lunge forward, but the officer held her steady. "Mr. Johnson, listen to me. This is all a mistake. I was protecting the HOA, protecting you. This man, he doesn't belong." "Enough," Johnson barked, his voice louder than I'd ever heard. The crowd hushed instantly. "You don't speak for the board. You never had the authority you pretended to have. And now you've dragged my name into this circus?" Karen's mouth opened and closed like a fish, no words forming. She looked cornered, like she wanted the earth to swallow her whole. Johnson turned to me, then to my wife, his voice steady. "On behalf of the HOA, I'm embarrassed. She acted alone and she'll face consequences. Please know she never represented us officially." I raised an eyebrow. Funny, because she had no problem waving your name around while trying to break into my home. The crowd murmured, nodding. Johnson winced, then sighed. "She's finished. The board will meet tomorrow to remove her permanently." He gestured toward Karen. "Do what you need to do." Karen finally broke down, sobbing through tears. "No, you can't. I built this neighborhood. I kept it perfect. You can't throw me away like this." but no one moved to help her. Not the cops, not Johnson, not a single neighbor. And then my wife leaned in, her voice low but sharp, just for Karen. You thought you could control everyone, but you forgot. Real authority doesn't need to scream. Karen's shoulders slumped, and for the first time, she looked small.
The officers guided Karen toward the squad car, her cries turning into broken mutters, half denial, half pleading. Cameras from neighbors' phones followed every step, the red-blue lights flashing against her tear-streaked face. The same woman who had handed out fake violation slips and barked orders at families now looked like a child caught stealing. As they reached the cruiser, she twisted back one last time, screaming, "You'll regret this! I'll call my lawyer! I'll shut this whole street down!" But before anyone could react, my wife stepped forward and held up a small folder she had tucked under her arm. "Already handled," she said flatly. She opened it just enough for the officers and Karen to see. Inside were printed copies of Karen's bogus fines, trespass notices, and even forged HOA letters, all matched against the security footage I had saved. The younger cop whistled under his breath. "That's airtight. She's cooked." Karen's knees gave out, and the officers had to push her gently into the back seat. Her threats dissolved into a muffled, pitiful sob. The crowd erupted again, cheering, clapping, some chanting justice. A few neighbors even patted my shoulder as they passed. One man muttered, "About time someone stood up to her." I glanced at Johnson, the HOA president, who was still standing stiff, ashamed but relieved. "You've got a lot of cleanup to do," I told him, "but she won't be terrorizing anyone here again." He nodded, swallowing hard. "You're right, and if you're willing, I'd like you at the next board meeting. We could use someone who actually respects the law." My wife gave him a look that said she'd think about it, then turned back to the crowd. "Everyone here deserves peace in their own homes. Tonight you saw what happens when someone abuses power. That ends now." As the cruiser door slammed shut and Karen was driven away, a hush settled. Neighbors exchanged glances, a mix of relief and awe. Then someone started clapping again, louder this time, until the whole street joined in. I slipped my arm around my wife's shoulders and whispered, "You know, I didn't even have to lift a finger. You handled everything." She smirked, eye still on the disappearing squad car. "That's what happens when you mess with the wrong door."
The street slowly emptied after the patrol cars drove off, but the energy hung heavy in the air, like a storm had finally passed. Neighbors lingered, shaking their heads, trading stories about the countless times Karen had harassed them. For the first time in months, there was laughter on the block instead of tension. I stood on the porch, arms still around my wife, watching it all. "Crazy thing," I said quietly. "She really thought she could decide who belonged here." My wife's gaze softened, but her voice carried weight. "People like her think power comes from fear. Real power comes from protecting people, not controlling them." I nodded, looking out across my yard. The same yard Karen once claimed wasn't mine. "This land is mine. I worked for it, paid for it, and no fake notice or screaming neighbor is ever going to take that away." The crowd thinned until it was just us under the porch light. I could still hear the faint wail of the cruiser siren fading into the night. I took a deep breath, letting the silence settle, then added with a small grin, "I didn't fight for this country just to be told I can't unlock my own front door." My wife chuckled, slipping her hand into mine. "And now the whole neighborhood knows exactly who they're dealing with." The stars overhead seemed brighter, the air lighter. For the first time since moving here, it felt like home again. Safe, free, and ours. And somewhere in the distance, Karen's cries faded into nothing.